Peter's legacy has always been a major concern of Russian intellectuals. Peter is a more complex character than he is sometimes given credit for. Some believe Peter's reforms divided the country socially and weakened it spiritually. Ryazanovsky points to a paradoxical dichotomy in the black and white images such as God/Antichrist, educator/ignoramus, architect of Russia's greatness/destroyer of national culture, father of his country/scourge of the common man. For Old Believers, he was the Antichrist because of the calendar changes and poll tax. Peter compared himself with King David or Noah with a divine mission. At his funeral, Prokopovich compared him with Moses and Solomon. Voltaire's 1759 biography gave 18th-century Russians a man of the Enlightenment, while Alexander Pushkin's The Bronze Horseman poem of 1833 gave a powerful romantic image of a creator god. Slavophiles in mid-19th century deplored Peter's westernization of Russia. Western writers and political analysts recounted the testimony or secret will of Peter the Great. It supposedly revealed his grand evil plot for Russia to control the world via the conquest of Constantinople, Afghanistan, and India. It was a forgery made in Paris at Napoleon's command when he started the invasion of Russia in 1812. Nevertheless, it is still quoted in foreign policy circles. The communists executed the last Romanovs, and their historians, such as Mikhail Pokrovsky, presented strongly negative views of the entire dynasty. Stalin, however, admired how Peter strengthened the state and wartime diplomacy, industry, higher education, and government administration. Stalin wrote in 1928, when Peter the Great, who had to deal with more developed countries in the West, feverishly built works in factories for supplying the army and strengthening the country's defenses, this was an original attempt to leap out of the framework of backwardness. As a result, Soviet historiography emphasizes both the positive achievements and the negative factor of oppressing the common people. After the fall of communism in 1991, scholars and the general public in Russia and the West gave fresh attention to Peter and his role in Russian history. His reign is now seen as the decisive formative event in the Russian imperial past. Many new ideas have merged, such as whether he strengthened the autocratic state or whether the Tsarist regime was not statist enough given its small bureaucracy. Modernization models have become contested ground. He initiated a wide range of economic, social, political, administrative, educational, and military reforms that ended the dominance of traditionalism and religion in Russia and initiated its westernization. His efforts included the secularization of education, organization of administration for effective governance, enhanced use of technology, establishing an industrial economy, modernization of the army, and the establishment of a strong navy. Historian Y. Vodarsky said in 1993 that Peter did not lead the country on the path of accelerated economic, political, and social development, did not force it to achieve a leap through several stages. On the contrary, these actions to the greatest degree put a brake on Russia's progress and created conditions for holding it back for 1.5 centuries. The autocratic powers that Stalin admired appeared as a liability to Yevgeny Anisimov, who complained that Peter was the creator of the administrative command system and the true ancestor of Stalin. During the reign of Peter the Great, the working poor population fell by 20% due to war, repression, persecutions, and refugees. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica, he did not completely bridge the gulf between Russia and the Western countries, but he achieved considerable progress in the development of the national economy and trade, education, science and culture, and foreign policy. Russia became a great power, without whose concurrence no important European problem could thenceforth be settled. His internal reforms achieved progress to an extent that no earlier innovator could have envisaged. While the cultural turn in historiography has downplayed diplomatic, economic, and constitutional issues, new cultural roles have been found for Peter, for example, in architecture, Petrine Baroque, and dress. James Crocraft argues, the Petrine Revolution in Russia, subsuming in this phrase the many military, naval, governmental, educational, architectural, linguistic, and other internal reforms enacted by Peter's regime to promote Russia's rise as a major European power, was essentially a cultural revolution, one that profoundly impacted both the basic constitution of the Russian Empire and, perforce, its subsequent development. The iconic representations of dead saints typical for centuries of Russian visual culture suddenly gave way to naturalistic portraiture. In popular culture, Peter has been featured in many histories, novels, plays, films, monuments, and paintings. They include the poems The Bronze Horseman, Poltava, and the unfinished novel The More of Peter the Great, all by Alexander Pushkin. The former dealt with the Bronze Horseman, an equestrian statue raised in Peter's honor. Alexei Nikolaevich Tolstoy wrote a biographical historical novel about him, named Peter I, in the 1930s. The 1922 German silent film Peter the Great, directed by Dmitry Buchovetsky and starring Emil Jannings as Peter. In 1929, A.N. Tolstoy's play depicted Peter as a tyrant who suppressed everyone and everything as if he had been possessed by demons, sowed fear, and put both his son and his country on the rack. The 1937-1938 Soviet film Peter the Great. The 1976 film How Tsar Peter the Great Married Off His More, starring Alexei Petrenko as Peter and Vladimir Vysotsky as Abram Petrovich Ganable. Peter was played by Jan Nicholas and Maximilian Schell in the 1986 NBC miniseries Peter the Great. The 2007 film The Sovereign Servant depicts the unsavory, brutal side of Peter during the campaign. A character based on Peter plays a major role in The Age of Unreason, a series of 4 alternate history novels written by American science fiction and fantasy author Gregory Keyes. Peter is one of many supporting characters in Neal Stephenson's Baroque cycle, mainly featuring in the 3rd novel, The System of the World. Peter was portrayed on BBC Radio 4 by Isaac Rouse as a boy, Will Howard as a young adult, and Elliot Cowan as an adult in the radio plays Peter the Great, The Gamblers and Peter the Great, The Queen of Spades, written by Mike Walker and broadcast in 2016. A verse in the Engineers Drinking Song references Peter the Great. There was a man named Peter the Great who was a Russian Tsar. When remodeling his castle, he put the throne behind the bar, he lined the walls with vodka, rum, and 40 kinds of beers, and advanced the Russian culture by 120 years. Peter was played by Jason Isaacs in the 2020 anti-history Hulu series The Great. Peter is featured as the leader of the Russian civilization in the computer game Sid Meier's Civilization VI. Peter was played by Ivan Kolesnikov in the 2022 Russian historical documentary film Peter I, The Last Tsar and the First Emperor.